What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Welcome to the show. Hope you're doing well whenever and wherever you're listening to this episode. Now, on the show today, singer-songwriter from Barrie, Ontario, Megan Ann. Megan, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How's it going?
It goes really, really well. I have talked on this show a number of times to a number of different artists about getting back to live. And as we're recording this show, you've got a slate of shows lined up and you just finished playing a couple different shows. So now that we're starting to get back to live music here in Ontario and in Canada in general, how has it been for you getting back on stage?
It has been amazing. I feel like I knew I missed it. I don't think I realized how deeply I missed it until I was back at it. And the first show that we got to play was my whole band at this local bar called The Queens. And the energy was amazing. And I got up on stage and I was just like, I can't believe this is happening right now. This feels like a dream. Yeah, it's been so wonderful to be back at it.
Now, as you're getting back out there, some of the shows have been indoor, some of the shows have been outdoors. How has that been, like the indoor shows? Was there any trepidation getting back up there, not knowing, kind of what you're dealing with, especially after a year and a half of really not playing out live?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Going into it, me and all my band members had already been like vaccinated, double vaxxed, all that. So that definitely made me feel better because when we're on stage together, those are the only people I'm really close to in a venue are those guys. But going into it, mostly it's been outdoors. The only indoor ones have had like plexiglass and, masks on unless you're like sat down. I don't know. I forgot English for a second there. Unless you're sitting down and like having a drink or something. If you're up, your mask is on. So going into venues, it's just been like making sure those protocols are in place. And then, from then on, there's only so much we can do beyond social distance and everything. So, yeah.
Now, as you've had those plexiglass barriers in some of those shows, first of all, how much did you have that Ron Burgundy, I'm in a glass case of emotion moment? But does it take away from that live music experience, from what you had pre-pandemic?
I don't think so. At all. It's funny. One place has plexi and they've stuck to the plexi, the sign saying no dancing, but I was dancing on stage the whole time. So all these videos I have just says no dancing and me dancing behind it. So that aspect I love. Beyond that, it hasn't really changed a lot. If anything, a lot of shows that we play, I'm bringing all my own sound equipment and stuff. And sometimes in a bar prior to the pandemic, there's people drinking and they get excited and they get really close to you. And I'm like looking at my equipment, like, please don't spill your beer on it. So it's actually kind of been fantastic. There's like a clear barrier. So yeah, I haven't minded that at all.
Exactly. And the only dancing on your side of the glass. That's it.
Exactly.
Now, before we get into your music, you brought up something that, a lot of people don't really understand. So when you go to, a local show with a local area musician, they usually have all their sound gear. Like a lot of these places don't have their own sound gear. Some do, but you have to come fully prepared. So let's go through, what it takes for you to be able to put on a show these days.
Just like gear wise?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So it's funny because my guitar player, we were in the studio and him and the engineer were just talking each other's ear off about gear. And I don't super follow a lot of that. Like I know how everything works, but as in terms of different brand names and stuff, I really couldn't care less. Whatever makes it sound as, as clear as possible. And I was standing there like, yeah, gear, I love it. Me too, gear. So it's like, Russell, come tell Jason about gear. Okay, basically we have like a PA system that's by Bose, and it's like a two-parter. It's the one where you have like all the bass coming out of the lower speaker and all the treble coming out of the higher with like a 180 thing. And I like that because we can just carry it all in one hand. And then obviously all the cables for that. And then we have a mixer that we plug into. My vocal, my guitar player's vocal, his guitar. If I'm bringing a ukulele or a keyboard, we have that all plugged in. Our mics. This one I just use for recording. For like live gigs, we just do Shure SM58s, classic.
The hammer of microphones, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Indestructible, which is great because I'm clumsy. Yeah, and I think that's about it for if I'm doing a duo show. If we're doing like a full band, it's all that plus like a guitar amp plus my bass player's amp and his microphone that he brings, and my drummer and his whole kit. Usually if we're doing a full band thing, there's mics there. So the drum kit will be mic'd by whoever the, sound engineer is at the show. But yeah, it's definitely a full car. And then my guitar player and I get to the venue and we gauge how tired we are by how many trips we think it'll take. Like if we're really amped, we'll be like 1 trip. And if it's later on, we'll be like, maybe it's like a 2-trip day. Maybe we walk it back and forth to get this all out there.
Now, September 2020, you released your most recent single, Flavor of the Month. So tell us a little bit about that and how it was actually putting out something, as we were going into the second wave here in Ontario.
For sure. Flavor of the Month was a song that I had for a minute, like about 1.5 years. That song had been done before I put it out. And the reason I waited on it was because I was hoping in 2020, we had studio dates booked in the spring of 2020 that obviously had to be canceled. And I was hoping to come out with like a full band project that fall. And so as it was becoming more apparent that the world was not going to open up anytime soon, I really wanted something out there. So I was like, I already have this song that I want out. I've been sitting on it long enough. Let's put it out into the world. It was kind of nice because usually I'm playing live a lot. So there's not always a ton of time for me to sit and promote recorded material. So to have a month where it was just all about advertising that the song was coming out it was cool to shift gears in that way.
Now, as things shut down, how, as far as being a musician goes, especially a gigging musician, how hard were those first few months for you?
It was so hard. It was so weird. It's like, here's this thing that I do all the time where I'm, practicing with just guitar player, practicing with my band, playing these shows, advertising the shows, emailing to book the shows, researching what festivals are going on and putting together recording dates and writing with people. And then all of a sudden it just pressed pause. And it was so strange, especially for the first couple weeks where the emails started coming in of venues canceling things, because when it first happened, we were like, oh, well, we have that show in May. That's probably fine. And, psych. So yeah, it was definitely a very difficult time having all of our, plans for the year, plans for the summer, one at a time, get backtracked. But I just had to shift gears. I started live streaming, which was something that I was never interested in before. I started doing that every week through a group called Barrie's Live Music Show, where all the money was just going for a different charity every week. I started co-writing online with people. I would just find people. There was like an online indie week, and I, met this guy in a chat room that's British, but he lives in Ottawa right now. And we were like, let's just write online because we can't get together anyways, which are things that I feel like if the world was open, we might not necessarily think of. But it's like, well, if I have to write online with, my bass player who lives down the street, I might as well write online with you too. So yeah, it was just a big shift in everything and what could be done.
You saw a lot of people, leaning towards these online collaborations, as you mentioned, like in some cases, somewhat local, in some cases, within province, in some cases globally, so how much of that, that sense of collaboration, that spirit of creativity that was born out of the the necessity to slow it down and to stay at home, how much do you think that's going to carry through once we're fully on the other side of this?
I hope a lot of it. Obviously the pandemic has been awful in so many ways, but the little glimmers of what we're talking about trying things you never would have tried before, writing with people and talking to people you might not have connected with before. I really hope it carries forward. A lot of people that I've written with online, we're still like, okay, as soon as this one's done, let's, just call each other again and do some more. So for me personally, I think it'll continue. And I think globally it will as well. I do.
Now, you had mentioned on Facebook that you had done 2 songs with Rogers Television up in Barrie that haven't seen the light of day yet. So what have we got coming down the pipe as far as new music?
So right now I'm looking at doing an acoustic EP, just me and my guitar player. His name's Russell, so it's going to be called Songs with Russ. I've never talked about this before, so this is the announcement, I guess. It's going to be 3 songs. We've got 2 done, and we are headed in to do another one. It's going to be out in September, October. And it's just, vocals, guitar, super mellow. I just really want to put out a project. And because like I have like a whole album in my brain that's a full band and has a whole like vibe and aesthetic to it. But because we can't do some of the things I want to do yet, this is the project right now. Songs with Russ, just like a 3-song acoustic, very just vibey EP. That's what I'm working on right now.
Now, when you initially start writing the songs at home kind of thing, they're obviously in one shape. And then, once you get to a studio, obviously it blossoms into something else there. So how does the song change from those initial sit down with the piano or sit down with the guitar kind of, musical sketchings, if you will? How much does that change to what what finally comes out?
This is such a good question. I love this. So usually I write songs. Yeah, I usually do lyrics first and take it to the piano, and then I'll have my band put it together, and we'll usually play through it a few times, and we like to know what end result we're aiming for. And then once we're in the studio, we'll record a scratch track and then layer up the instruments. So we'll have full band in a room play it, and then the drummer will have that in his ears and he'll start playing that. And then, we layer each instrument one at a time. Things start to change in that moment. We might hear like, okay, well, what if we put hand claps here? And then we just do it. And then we just see what it sounds like. And then, my bassist in the most recent thing we recorded together was like, what if you do this harmony underneath? And we just do it and see what it sounds like. So I guess things really come to life in the studio. You start playing in ways that you didn't anticipate until that moment. And then sometimes in post-production, I'll be talking to my engineer and I'll be like, okay, well, he did this really cool thing in a song that's not out yet where he put this like whoosh noise leading back into the bridge and he just snuck it in there. And I was like, oh, that's so sick. So I feel like the writing of it is kind of like the emotion nitpicking aspect for me. And then the studio is where like I like to play and just like, we'll try it. We'll see what it turns out like.
Now you kind of got things off started with a bit of a bang on the Phoenix EP that came out in 2018. In that you got to work with Jazz Feezy and with Michael Jack, who had worked with Hilary Duff and Nelly Furtado. How did that come about?
You really did your research. This is great.
But of course.
I love it. Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes you do an interview and they're like, so where are you from? So I did a television show when I was a teenager. It was a local show called Local Live, which is also through Rogers TV, and it broadcast across like Simcoe County. I don't know how many different cities, but it was a bunch. It was a lot of fun. And I did that for a few years. And the prize for the season that I won was to have a song done by these people. And so I had written the song, it was called Stay Out All Night, and did a scratch track of that, which got sent to Jazz, who then made the whole backing track for it, the whole production of it. And then from there, I went into the Rose Room in Toronto, did all the vocals, and then it was mixed by Michael Jack, who, as you said, has worked with Hilary Duff, Nelly Furtado. His website is like a mile long of so many impressive names. So it was all through that TV show that I got the opportunity to work with such cool people.
When you're doing that first recorded song with people who have that kind of resume, I mean, you mentioned the website being a laundry list of talent that they've worked with. Was that intimidating at all when you sit there and go, okay, they worked with them and them and them and them and I'm me, or was it a very natural experience? Like, were they able to kind of make you feel at home in the studio?
Honestly, I didn't really see them a ton. So they judged the show. So I had met them several times, super nice guys. But in terms of the actually recording process, it was like I sent a track and then got a track back, and then I sent the vocals and then got the mix back. So there wasn't a ton of communication, which was maybe good, because maybe at the time, if they had been sitting right there staring at me recording, it could have been very intimidating. But as I said, I did the show for a few years. So at this point, it wasn't like Jazz Feezy and Michael Jack. It was just like, oh, Jazz and Michael are working on this. This is awesome. So at that point, I was a little bit more comfortable.
And then, of course, the rest of the songs come out, and the Phoenix EP, gets released out on Spotify and on CD and the like. So how has the reaction been for that EP and for your music as more ears start to hear what you're putting out?
It's been good. It's so fun and interesting to hear people's thoughts, because making music is such a personal experience. I'm writing all the songs on Phoenix I wrote by myself. And then I was in the studio with just like a handful of people and making all of these decisions, aside from Stay It All Night, which a bunch of people touched, but everything else was just like me and my engineer deciding. So yeah, to have it go out in the world and have all these people say things that I just didn't expect. Like Call In was a song that I just like put all the instrumentation on, sent it to someone to master, did it all myself. A last minute addition. And now we're 3 years later, but last year I got a message from a girl that I met one time in Toronto, and she's like, hey, I just want to tell you that I'm going through like a really difficult breakup. I've been listening to Call In every night, and as soon as it starts, I feel so comforted. And I was like, I'm gonna cry right now. Like it was just the craziest thing, So reactions like that really are crazy, to take it from such an internal place to like, oh yeah, people are listening to this and they have ideas. Long answer short, it's been good. Sorry, I'm a rambler.
It's always been interesting to me that when someone writes a song, of course, it comes from a very personal place. And then when someone listens to it and they associate with it, like as you said, someone in Toronto listening and trying to get through a breakup, you have almost, and I remember watching a live stream concert from a band called the Nixons, and they were talking about how this, one of their biggest songs and how it's meant to other people. So there's this almost transfer of ownership of the song that they wrote to the people, and how they, they react to it and how they kind of, take it into their own lives kind of thing. So, when you hear stories like that of people who have used your music, whether as relaxation, whether as therapy, whether as enjoyment, whether as catharsis, do you feel that transfer of ownership, and how important is that to you when people take the songs that you wrote and associate to themselves and are able to enjoy that music more than just as ear candy?
I mean, it means the world to me. I feel like part of the reason why I wanted to make music was because when I was younger and I would hear these songs that I could really relate to, it's almost this sense of magic, to know that someone else has felt the exact same thing that you're feeling right now. And I feel like music, so much of it is about that human connection and about, sharing stories and having someone else be like, I know exactly what you're talking about. So when I get that from people, yeah, it means the absolute world. It's crazy.
Now, of course, in 2018, you were also won the award, the Barrie Arts Award for Emerging Artist. So, with the EP out, with awards being won, 2018 was a pretty good year, I think.
It was. There was no such thing as COVID. It was amazing.
But, when you have all that, is there a pressure that comes with winning these awards, on the heels of a release, and then, you have to follow that up with, so what's next?
Right. I try to not get caught up in any of that. To win an award is amazing, because it just seems like a signpost of like you did something right, but yeah, I try not to think about it too hard in terms of pressure, because I think when I'm writing, it comes from such like a vulnerable and hopefully authentic place. So if I get it too in my head of like, this song needs to, win me another award, I feel like it kind of cheapens it in a way. So yeah, I try to just always look to the next thing. So as soon as I won that award, I was like applying for Seneca College to go study music further, and just kept writing and kept gigging and kept booking things. Like I try to just look to the next thing, because I feel like you can't get too caught up in what's already happened. Appreciate it, but then look to the next thing.
Now, you've been fortunate to have some of your music played on various internet radio stations. So when you think about how important internet radio has become in spreading the voice of independent artists, how cool has it been when you hear like, oh, your song was played in this country, and what's the furthest so far that you know of that your music has been heard on the internet?
The furthest so far, there's a station in Los Angeles called Indie Star Radio, and they blow me away. Whenever I tune in to listen to it, you hear this track and they sound so good and so professional, and you're like, what do you mean this is an independent artist? Like, this sounds like a gold record. So that's probably the furthest that I know mine has been is on that station. It's very cool. I feel like in the same way that artists are using, TikTok and whatever else to create their own careers versus, 50, 40 years ago when it was like the traditional, you needed to shake hands at the record label or there was no other way you were going to record anything. I feel like internet radio has just blossomed in the same way of like, we don't necessarily need to be on traditional radio or Billboard Top 40 to still have people listen.
Now, you mentioned, being on, a show on Rogers Community Television, and full disclosure, I spent a number of years as a volunteer at a cable station in Ottawa. So how important is it when you live in a community that has a community television station and they have those shows out there that are designed to showcase local independent artists like yourself? How important is that community station to the music scene of your city?
It's definitely huge. I feel like it's just an extra layer of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just like validity. Like I find like if I post, a 30-second cover, it'll get like, 30 likes. If I post I'm on Rogers TV, it's like 100 people are like, oh my gosh, what, you're on TV? Like to be able to have that extra step in looking more professional and more authentic, to have these other people now rooting for you. It's definitely invaluable. And through doing shows with Rogers, that's how I really feel like I first got my start in the music scene here. Because I was just meeting so many people and I was getting used to how to network, how to be on stage, what looks good on camera. Like, it's just been, to grow up doing that was just like an invaluable experience for sure.
Have you had that moment where, after one of the shows is aired, people were like, oh, hey, I saw you on community TV the other day?
Yes. I remember getting off like my bus in high school and my bus driver was like, Megan. And I didn't know why she would know. I was like, yeah. And she's like, I saw you on Rogers last night. And I was like, oh, cool.
This is the Major Mixtape Podcast. My guest today, Megan Ann, Barrie, Ontario indie singer-songwriter. We're going to step away for a couple of seconds there, and when we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about Megan.
Welcome to the Infinite Rabbit Hole Podcast. Let us be your hosts and your guides through the world of the strange and the misunderstood. There is an entire world that parallels our own, and with your help, we can uncover the truth and break the walls of our dimension to expose the reality that lies on the fringe of our existence. Follow us into the worlds of science fiction, cryptozoology, the paranormal, extraterrestrial, fringe medicine, psychological anomalies, and everything in between. Our show is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Now, strap in, hang tight, and open your eyes, ears, and minds as we dive into the infinite rabbit hole.
All right, welcome back to the Major Mixtape Podcast. Our guest today, Megan Ann, singer-songwriter of Barrie, Ontario. Now, let's learn a little bit more about you. Do you remember the music that you listened to that inspired you to want to become a singer-songwriter?
Absolutely. Growing up, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, we'll get it out in the world. I love her. I remember being like, being a kid and getting CDs and pulling out the album booklet and reading all the lyrics. I wanted to know what they were saying. And I started looking at who was writing them, when I was really young, like 9 or 10, I was listening to like Hilary Duff and Lindsay Lohan and, whoever else was big on Disney at the time, and seeing like 7 or 8 different random names below the song and being like, oh, so she's not, singing about, these aren't her stories that she's telling, So as soon as I started buying like Taylor Swift records when I was like 12 or 13, Allie and AJ, Jonas Brothers, and seeing that they were writing their own stuff, that was something that really clicked in my brain of like, oh, wow, like I could do that too. I could write and sing my own stories. And that was definitely like a big eye opener to me for sure.
When you are listening to an album and you're going through the liner notes, how much of a turnoff is it when you realize that, okay, they did write that song, it's not theirs kind of thing? Do you associate more with the people who are writing their own stories and like, full on, like this is their work, music, lyrics, the whole works?
I feel like I definitely gravitate towards that more. When I was younger, it was definitely like, oh, they didn't even write it. I feel like I've gotten more mature about that and being like, yeah, but if I were to write a song and someone else were to record it, I would still be excited about that song and proud about that song and realize that it meant something to me. So just because it's not necessarily the singer writing the song doesn't mean I'll like write off the song. If it's still a good song, if it's a bop, it's a bop, right? But yeah, I definitely feel like the people that I list as my favorite artists tend to be the ones that are also writing their own material.
And growing up, how much of your musical influence was influenced by things that maybe your parents listened to or music that was around the house at the time?
Honestly, not a ton. Like, I feel like my dad, he plays guitar, but he listens to totally different music than me. He's like Peter Frampton and I don't know, Eric Clapton and the Eagles and stuff like that. And I feel like I never really gravitated towards that. We love to show each other things, but I feel like we really listen to different vibes. My mom has always been such a huge supporter of me. So when I was like 13 listening to the Jonas Brothers, like that's just what she would put on in the car. Like that was the concert we were going to, was Jonas Brothers. So I feel like my mom and I kind of have the same taste in music, but we just kind of gravitate towards the same people, I think.
There comes a point where everyone takes their own money and goes and buys the first record for themselves. Not like here's an album for Christmas, here's a birthday gift or anything. Like literally take their own money, go to the record stores, like this is my album. I bought this. No one else's influence. Do you remember the first time with your own money you went and bought an album for yourself?
I genuinely don't. Isn't that sad? You think I would, right? You think it would be like burned in my brain. It was probably a Taylor Swift album, and or I was really into like Mariana's Trench when I first started, working and was a teenager with my own money. So it was probably one of those. It was either Taylor or Mariana's Trench album. That's what I'll go with from here on out.
Was there anything that sparked the interest to actually sit down? I mean, it's one thing to sit and listen to music and enjoy the music, but what is it that really sparked the transition to music lover to music writer?
Definitely my love of lyrics from a young age. As I said, I was like 9 or 10 reading the lyrics and really being like, wow, that's such a cool line. I love that. I want to recreate that. And I started writing around that age too. The songs then, if I were to find the lyrics now, probably not great, but I was trying. And then as I got older and started to actually, feel the emotions that I was writing about, right? Like love, heartbreak, jealousy, excitement, whatever, to a greater degree. That's when I became more interested in the idea of like capturing the moment. I love that about a song. Like I can listen back on something I wrote years ago and be like, I don't feel that anymore, but I forgot the way that I was viewing that situation. And now I have this like perfectly crystallized moment of it. So I think I just write because I love lyrics and I love to like capture the feeling of something. For someone who comes from a bit more of a rock background, the idea of putting a song together usually stems from here's the riff or here's the backbeat kind of thing. But you said your songwriting kind of stems from the lyrics. So as you start to write the song, do you find that the lyrics inspire the chords, or is it one of those things where you find you're kind of writing the piano melody and then you have to kind of rework the lyrics around that? For sure. I usually will write, I have like a running list in my phone notes app at all times of various one-liners, ideas, it might just be like, I overhear a snippet of conversation, that's good. Or I, wake up in the middle of the night with a verse in my head and I do that. And then eventually as I'm sitting usually at the piano and I'm playing around with stuff and I find something I like, then I'll be like, oh, this kind of sounds like it could be about this. And then I'll find, where I begun a lyrical idea, try to find a way to place it. And yeah, naturally the lyrics evolve a little bit as I fit them to music. As you can tell by this interview, I tend to be a bit verbose. So I usually have to cut a word or two or shift something around, or as I'm writing, I realize, oh, the song's kind of turning into more about this. So this line doesn't really work anymore. So yeah, it definitely evolves as I bring in music a little bit. Yeah. I said that like I had more to say, but that was the end of that one.
But as you're sitting down at the piano and you're transitioning it from, a sheet of lyrics to like a full-fledged song, how do you know? How do you know when the song is there, when you've got the right melody line, when you've got the right chord progressions? How do you know when the song has reached that point where it's ready to transition into the studio and then develop from there?
For sure. It's usually just a feeling. Like it's just like this nebulous, you know, unable to be put into words kind of feeling. A lot of stuff I write all the time, and sometimes I write a song and I'm just like, okay, I needed to get this emotion out. The song's not great. No one else needs to hear it. I wrote it. It's fine. And then other times I'm like, oh wait, I like this. I like this. This could be something. I find I usually will sit with something for a while before I'll show it to my band or go to record it. A big tell for me is if it stays stuck in my head. You know, I've had moments where I wake up the next day or a couple days later and I'm like humming something and I'm like, oh, that's what I worked on the other day. Okay, that's a good sign. So that's definitely a big one. If the melody gets caught in my head, then I'm usually like, okay, let me take another look at this one.
There's an old saying that goes, you have your entire life to write your first album. And then you only have a short span of time to get to your second album because you've already, put all the best songs on that first album. So as you've been working towards the next album, how has that process been going from, okay, well, I put all these songs out, now what next? And how much do you live test some of the new songs before saying, okay, this is good enough to go to the next CD?
So the first album I put out when I was like 22 or 23. And yeah, so it was like 22 years of whatever I thought my best work was. And now I have it's been 3 years to try to find the next one. So it's definitely, as soon as I put out Phoenix, there was a moment like a month later, it was like, oh my gosh, what is the next one going to look like? I've been writing a ton. I'm definitely in a place now where I know what all of the songs are that are going to be on the next one. That will probably not come out until like next summer or next fall. There's the acoustic EP coming out, but the bigger one, that's the bigger project, will be the following year. Because of exactly what you're saying, of just writing it, honing in on what's the best, spending time on it. So by the time it'll come out, have been, 4 years or almost 4 years since the first one. But I feel like I've always had the notion that as soon as it's out in the world, it's out in the world, right? Like until it's out, I can spend time refining lyrics, really go in and record and give notes back to the recording and really hone in on exactly what I want it to sound like. And then once it's out, it's out. So yeah, it's definitely been a long process for me. I think maybe the more that I put stuff out, the more that I do things, I'll eventually get faster at it and less guarded at it. As to playing it live, definitely. So on Songs with Russ, out this fall at some point, there's going to be a song called The Last Dance, which I wrote with my guitar player, Russell. And we have played it live a few times just to, practice it, gauge how people are reacting to it, get really comfortable with it so that once the album's out, we'll perform it at everything all the time. And yeah, it's kind of fun. I feel like when you're at a venue and you're able to say like, this next song's not out, it perks people up a little bit more because they're like, oh, I'm one of the first people to hear this. So yeah, it's definitely very fun doing that.
You mentioned earlier in the show that being in the studio does tend to change the song a little bit, mostly in arrangements and whatnot. But, obviously if you're live testing a song before it goes to record, obviously you're going to sit there and go, well, maybe this part doesn't work. So what changes the song more, the studio or live testing it?
Probably live testing it, because every time we play it or I play it, I might realize in the moment, if I'm playing just piano, I'm like, okay, well, this part's a little bit too long. Like maybe we could cut a line. And that kind of gives you more time to really feel out the song and feel what's working, what's not. Whereas studio, as soon as you put that bass down, like that's what you're building on top of. That's what it's going to be. So yeah, probably live is where I edit things more.
When you consider the whole songwriting process, what is the largest hurdle for you to overcome when it comes to, crafting a song?
Definitely getting out of my own head. I have found that since I've put stuff out, I catch myself sometimes being like, okay, but is this part catchy enough? Is this line interesting enough? Is this unique enough? Does this sound too much like someone else? Like I find myself writing from the perspective of it heading to someone else's ears. So the biggest hurdle is definitely to be like, okay, it'll come the way it comes. You can, always edit it later. So definitely just try not to get too caught up in it needs to sound like this kind of record, like to just write it and figure it out afterwards.
Knowing that, now that, of course, Phoenix is out, and as well as Flavor of the Month, do you find yourself avoiding listening to those songs again because you don't want to have that, for lack of a better term, George Lucas moment where you want to go back and tweak things?
That's a good question. I don't think I avoid listening to them. I don't often put them on. There's something, I mean, I really like all the songs. But I don't often sit down and be like, I'm going to listen to Phoenix today. But not for that reason. I feel like naturally as I get older, my music just evolves on its own. So I don't really see myself retracing the same patterns or ideas. And I also don't really find myself being like, oh, I wish that part was different. I just try to take it as like, well, at the moment, it was exactly what I wanted. That's the one nice thing about, aside from Stay Out All Night, every other song I've been the one like producing it, the one in charge, the one, telling the engineer, can we bring this in? Can we bring this part louder? So that's been a really good thing of like, I don't really want to change anything because at the time I spent hours and hours and hours making it exactly what I wanted it to be at the time. So
you mentioned as well that you have some situations where you're playing live and it's just you and a guitarist, then you have a full band situation. So as a performer, is there one that you prefer over the other?
I like it all for different reasons. If I am playing just solo, which doesn't happen too often except for live streams, I can kind of, learn something that morning. I can be like, oh, I really am into this song. Let's just, pop the chords up and just jam it out and see what happens. So that's fun. If I'm playing just with my guitar player, we kind of play this game because the duo sets usually are like 3 or 4 hour, like cover gigs, like longer things. So we play a game where one of us just starts a song and the other one has to figure out what it is and just start joining in. So that part of it is so fun. And you can't really do that with a whole band because it's then 4 different brains trying to figure out what's going on. But then the fun stuff with the band is that it's just a whole different energy. It's a whole different vibe. It's so much more dancey. It's so much, sharper and tighter and more polished, and they're usually only like 45 minutes or an hour, so there's more original content. People are paying more attention. So yeah, they're all different worlds. I wouldn't say like any one more than the other, because they're all very nice in their own unique ways.
So it's come to the point in the show where it's time to get to know you, but in true Made You a Mixtape fashion. So if you, Megan Ann, had to introduce yourself to a total stranger, but instead of saying, hi, I'm Megan, here's my CD, you give them a mixtape. And on that tape are songs that tell the story of you. What songs are on that tape and why are those songs there?
Okay. How many different songs can I give you?
We've had as many as 10. We've had as few as 1. So there's your range.
I have a list of 8. I came prepared for this.
Homework complete.
Yes. I didn't want to have like a brain malfunction halfway through. It's nice because some things we've talked about already, so I don't have to explain the song as much. But okay, here we go. So the first one is going to be Love Just Is by Hilary Duff. Okay. This is the first song I ever played live. I was like 9 years old. There was a school talent show. And that's the song that I chose. So that to me is always like, the start of it all is that song. The next song would be Love Story by Taylor Swift. Because I remember when that song came out, I was like 13. I listened to it for hours and hours. I thought it was the greatest song ever written. And that, to me, kind of encapsulates my love of people who are writing their own music and really inspired me as a songwriter. The next one is Valerie by Amy Winehouse. And that one's on there because when I was first auditioning for Local Live, that was the song that I did the first year that show ran. And as I said before, that kind of introduced me to everyone on Rogers TV, a bunch of the music community, got me used to performing on stage, performing for a camera. It's where I met, my voice teacher that I had for years. It just really, took my musical career to the next level. The next one is PDA by Scott Hellman. Have you heard of it?
I haven't actually.
Oh, he's cool. He's with Warner. His big song years ago was Bungalow. I don't know. Anyways, but PDA, because I went to the music video shoot for that. And I was there for like 5 hours. I will never know a song inside out more than I know PDA. But while we were there, it was like in this club, and we were like background for him and his band putting on a show and us in the audience. And they took a break and they were filming something at the back of the venue, and I was tired and I sat on the stage, which I don't know if I was supposed to do. And his bass player, Dylan, came running over just to move his bass out of the way. I guess I was just some strange girl. He didn't want me to touch it. And I was like, no, it's good. And then he sat down and started talking to me. And then he ended up playing bass for me for a few months. So that song to me is really encapsulates, like, I've played with a few different people in a few different bands. So that song to me is just the idea of like, you never know when the next collaboration is coming from. 26 by Paramore is just my favorite song of all time. It has this beautiful line in it that says, hold on to hope if you've got it. Don't let it go for nobody. They say that dreaming is free, but I wouldn't care what it cost me. And I just, every time it's too good. So that one. I have Over the Rainbow by Judy Garland on here. I have that song, I think, from a technical standpoint, just one of the greatest songs ever written. And I have a big love of, all things vintage, all things musical theater, huge theater fan. So that to me is that one. Lover, also by Taylor Swift. This is almost just 50 Taylor Swift songs. But that song is just mine and my partner's song. When we first heard it, we'd been going out for like 5 or 6 months, and he was like, what's up? And I was like, oh, I'm staying up till midnight because Taylor Swift's coming out with a new song. And he, on his end of town, also stayed up, and we're listening to the same song at the same time, but in different places. But it's just kind of like our song now. And he's obviously a huge factor in my life. So Lover by Taylor Swift. And the last one I put on was Phoenix by Megan Ann, because I figured if I made a playlist out of this later, I would need a self-plug. But Phoenix for a long time was my favorite song I'd written, and I felt like really encapsulated a lot of emotions. And it's funny because as soon as I wrote it and decided that my first album, I wanted it to be called Phoenix, I saw the word everywhere. You would not believe how many different stores, businesses, on the side of trucks, license plates, and books. I saved this for this interview. I went for lunch with people the other day, and the server, I don't know if you can see, but the server,
oh wow,
it's like I see it everywhere. So that, yeah, those are my songs. They did it.
Now, what is still to come for Megan Ann?
Hopefully a lot. Hopefully we're on an upward trajectory. I'm working on Songs with Russ, the acoustic EP, out either September or October of this year. And then once that's done, I'm going to go right into recording the album that is coming out hopefully next year, summer or fall. I already know the name, but I'm not going to say it yet, just in case I change it. So a lot of recording coming up next, a lot of gigs. We have like 3 gigs in the next week. I'm already tired, but very excited. And yeah, hopefully it just goes up from there. I don't know. Other than that, can't tell you. I try to just focus on the work and hope everything else comes. Is there something that still hasn't happened yet that you would love to see down the road? For me? Yes. I don't know why I thought it'd be for something else.
No, for Bob down the street. Really want him to get that new car.
Oh my gosh, exactly. A new car. Obviously, I feel like it's every artist's dream to win like a Grammy or, an AMA or some kind of big award like that, or a Juno. So, in the future, never say never. That would be amazing. All right, Megan, thank you so much for this. Where can our listeners find you, and how can they hear your music? Everything, all my links are on meganannmusic.com. That's MEGANANNE music. Don't forget the E.com. Yeah, sometimes people do, so I like to really stress that one. And then Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, Tidal, I don't know what, there's so many, but it's all under Megan Ann. The EP is called Phoenix. And then I have 2 other songs on there outside of the EP, Flavor of the Month and Christmas Morning, my last minute Christmas song. Megan, thank you so much for this, and all the best in the future. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the Made You a Mixtape podcast. Now, if you're listening to us right now on any of the audio streaming services that you can also hear Megan Ann on, you can actually watch this entire interview, see what was on the receipt, over on YouTube.
But if you are watching this on YouTube, you already know what's on the receipt, but you can actually go over to any of those audio streaming services, wherever you get your podcasts, download and listen to us on the go. This is the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. We'll catch you next time. Take care.